Even if you're not JS developer, come on, you need to know Linux. And I'm not even saying expert. You're not compiling your own kernel and stuff like that. But ls, cat, echo, and all those things. You cannot do everything through Visual Studio Code buttons, hopefully.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 246. How to become a DevOps Architect in 2024. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darin and Viktor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darin reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Viktor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darin Pope and Viktor Farsic. Viktor, as we have started out in 2024, I've seen some questions come in about, hey, I want to level up. I want to be an architect now. What would you say to those people?
Architect in the DevOps space.
Yeah, not an architect in the building space. Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
I would say good luck with that. DevOps is probably the widest space you can imagine, right? And it would be very hard, right? Because let's say that you're a big company, right? Big company, like thousands of employees. You're probably running things on on-prem and in AWS and in Azure for good measure, right? You're using Kubernetes and you're using mainframe. And you're having dozens of databases and what's not, right? It would be very hard to say, here's a person who is going to architect all that. I feel that in that specific scenario, that person would be more like a manager, maybe, right? Kind of, I know how to get relevant people in the same room so that we figure it out. Then I'm the person designing it. That would be one end of the spectrum, like really big. You have the other end of the spectrum, like smaller companies, right? Small, tiny companies. And for them, I would say don't bother. Don't bother with any of those things. Just use a service. Figure out what is the service, like Fly.io. I run applications there. That works for me, right? And I need something more. Go Cloud Run, right? Or Azure Container Apps, and so on and so forth. Try to avoid it. I bet that's the example. That's probably a recommendation that not many people in this space are giving. Kind of, what should we do, like the DevOps architect, right? And the answer is avoid it.
Avoid it at all costs. So I'm going to go back to your large company example real quick. When I've worked in large companies in the past, the architecture teams were made up of 10 to 20 people for the whole organization. And the only tools that the people in that group knew how to use were Microsoft Word and Visio. And that was it. They hadn't touched code or hardware or anything else in sometimes decades. But yet they were architecting and making the decisions on whatever was being handed to them in a nice glossy brochure from a salesperson.
Yeah, those days are hopefully gone. And I know that I'm not right. But I feel that everybody needs to be technical and everybody needs to know how to write code. And everybody needs to have a certain level of understanding of everything else, like cloud and Kubernetes and so on and so forth. And then you specialize, right? When I say everybody should write code, I don't mean that everybody should be coder 8 hours a day and things like that. But if what you know is writing Word documents and what you do is writing Word documents, I don't think that you belong in this industry. Sorry to say that, but it's recently I had a question on YouTube. Actually, not a question, a statement more. It was about certain subject, doesn't matter what it is, but the comment was, this is better because this allows DevOps people not to write code. I think there is a time and place for writing code. There is time and place for writing YAML. But saying this is better because this allows people who don't know how to write code not to write code is a very, very strange approach to me. Not to say wrong.
I believe that could be a slippery slope as well. Just because you start going down that path, and then what happens when you need to do whatever under the hood is? You need just that one little extra step that you can't do. You're in a lot of trouble.
When people ask me about DevOps, this and that, architect or whatever, if I would have to name 2 skills, that would be Linux and shell scripting. That's what you must know. Everything else is a bonus. And if you're afraid to write a shell script because conditionals in shell are too complicated, I think that there are better professions than software industry.
I don't like writing shell scripts when I have to use conditionals. That's when I will bail out to something else.
Oh, exactly. But that's very different from, you could have answered, I don't like writing shell scripts when there are conditionals, hence I will not write any code.
Right. And that was not my answer.
That's very different. Huh?
That was not my answer.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying it. Kind of, hey, now I also don't like, to be honest, if there is more than 2 shell scripts, two if statements in a shell script, I'm already moving to something else. That's my limit, right? What I'm trying to say is that, you need to write code. And you need to know Linux. Doesn't matter what you do. Even if you're not JS developer, come on, you need to know Linux. And I'm not even saying expert. You're not compiling your own kernel and stuff like that. But ls, cat, echo, and all those things. You cannot do everything through Visual Studio Code buttons, hopefully.
Well, this takes me back to 241 when we had Whitney on. And she was learning Kubernetes, and there was a lot of an assumed knowledge in the course that she was taking that she didn't know what it was until she finally figured out, oh, this is Linux. I need to understand this before I can learn that.
I have a rule when creating content that I should never try to avoid at all costs using something that I haven't explained already, right? Sometimes I would create material that I did not plan to do, but only because I'm working on this and I realized that I will need to use that to that. So I'm going to create first material for that, right? To kind of introduce you to that and then coming back to what I really want to talk about, right? That's why some of my material is very weird. But then after Whitney mentioned that, I realized that that's not true at all. I made so many assumptions and I just assumed that everybody's running on Linux, Unix, one way or another, right? And I never mentioned even, hey, here's the explanation how to use grep. It's simply there. Or cat, or ls, or chmod, right? So even if you try your best, you must make some assumptions, and Linux is just assumed to me. And when I say Linux, I don't mean, deep, but at least some basics.
And to not leave the Windows people out, if you're in a Windows ecosystem, you've got to learn the basics of Windows. I'll even say PowerShell.
I remember, what was it like, until maybe 2-3 years ago? Yeah, when we were doing actually the courses in Udemy, I was going through the testing phase and trying everything on both Windows and Linux, right? Specifying, okay, if you're Windows, then this, and if you're Linux, then this. I don't do that anymore. I just assume WSL. I kind of assume that now we are there, right? It's Nix for everybody, no matter whether you're macOS or Linux or Windows user, right? And when I say for everybody, I don't mean that, hey, you might choose to use PowerShell as your daily driver, right? But you understand that there is WSL, and when you use somebody else's material, that's what you're going to see, right?
Now, if you're listening to this for the first time and you're thinking, wait, Viktor has courses on Udemy? Not anymore. Those were all taken down.
Not anymore.
Those are gone. So just in case you're going to look for that, they're not there anymore. So we talked about Whitney realizing that she needed to learn something else. Your answer to that was, okay, I'm going to do this, but I need to do that first. So you do that, and then you come back to this. But here's a problem with that, literally, is people don't know that they need to go back and look at the previous things in order to go back to this. Are you confused now? You should be. You do an okay job, I'll say even a good job, on pointing out to people, hey, you need to go look at this first before you continue on with the rest of what we're working on now. Most people don't do that. So how would you tell somebody, okay, look, when you hit that brick wall, sort of like Whitney did, she hit that brick wall and was, what are they talking about? What should people do now in 2024? Where should they go first?
Like starting from scratch first?
Not so much starting from scratch, but it's like, okay, Viktor just talked about grep. I heard about it in the past, but I don't know anything about grep. Where should they go and try to figure out what's going on with grep?
I don't have the answer where, to be honest.
Can I nudge you in a direction?
Huh?
I'm going to give an answer, and then I'm going to nudge you in a direction.
Okay.
The first place you look is whatever the command is, -- help. Right? That's the first thing. Now, if the command is any good, you're going to get a lot of information. But at least you know there's information there. The second place, I'm actually going to give 3. 2 plus a third. Second is man and whatever the command is. That way you get the full manual for that command. And the third is, should they go Google for it? Or should they go somewhere else?
I would say that there is, at least in my case, there is a step before all those. Is I don't know what grep is. And when I don't know what grep is, at least I go -- help or man or whatever it is. Okay, I'm already familiar with this thing, right? But I don't know what's the flag or argument to accomplish specific outcome with that something. Then I got to help a lot, right? But at least to me, I prefer more human readable, more human touch type of approach to get the first contact with something. I prefer a blog post or something like that, right? I tend to Google. Okay, I don't know what this is. Never heard of it, never used it. Usually Google blog post. And then after using it for a while, then, at least for me, then it's help.
Now, if you're listening to this right now and you're starting to yell at us because, look, I know what grep is. People really don't need to know these basic things. Let me tell you, as an architect, if you don't know these basic things, let's go ahead and just pull back the cover on this. If you are a building architect and you are doing line drawings for building a building, do you not need to know steel? Do you not need to know concrete? Do you not need to know how ground works? Do you not need to know how electricity works? Now, you may not be doing the mechanicals, because this is the area I come out of. You may not be doing it for HVAC, but if you're the architect for the building, there's a lot of things you need to know. And if you're not willing to understand the pure basics, as Viktor said earlier, go into a different line of work. Period.
There are basics and basics, I feel. At least I'm not a person who... I learn basics of something that is unavoidable, like Linux, right? Or Nix, whatever sort you're using. And a few other things. But then I forget about it. But what happens is that the moment I'm jump into a topic and I go through it and I find that, oh, there is grep, right? I don't know what is grep. That's when I stop. Kind of like that's when I abandon that temporarily and go back, right, to something else. You can. What I'm trying to say is that if you have rudimentary knowledge of something, you can discover the rest as you go, right? You can go one step forward, 3 steps back, and then you return.
But my boss won't let me go 3 steps back. We have to deliver by next week. We just have to push through.
Yeah, but how do you deliver if you don't understand the things you're delivering? Right, just by using them? It's a bit tough. It's a bit tough.
It's extremely baffling when I hear conversations like that.
There are very often those basic holes in people's experience and knowledge that lead to things that are baffling, right? When we discuss how microservices should be or not, and I'm now not entering into discussion whether to use microservice-based architecture or monolithic or anything else in between, because that would be a separate one. There is pros and cons for everything. But if we do talk about microservices, how it should be organized, whomever uses Linux knows perfectly well how all that works. If you're used to it, you know exactly how it works. It's exactly the same knowledge, experience, and everything. Linus Torvalds, you can thank him for microservices from God knows how long ago, right? I mean, long before him, actually. Same logic, kind of tiny things that pipe into each other. There is no single solution to your problem, but a combination of solutions. Always.
And if you don't know what pipe is, again, go find another job.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's sort of the basics. We'll get to like an intermediate. We'll assume that there's some knowledge. Where should they go next? But before we get there, we want to thank today's sponsor, Barbaro Moho. And if you haven't heard of Barbaro Moho before, they are, in fact, if you're watching the video, they are a Cuban hot sauce, which the video is not doing very well. But let's go ahead and give them their due right now. Are you ready to spice up your life while you work on building towards being a DevOps architect in 2024? Well, beat Barbaro Moho, the delicious Cuban hot sauce with a kick that's sponsoring today's episode. Barbaro Moho brings the heat with their unique Cuban marinade base, adding an unforgettable flavor to your favorite dishes. With flavors like El Habanero, Halibo, Bonazzo, and Best Day Ever, there's a perfect match for everyone's taste buds. As a DevOps Paradox listener, you're entitled to an exclusive 25% discount on your first order. Just visit barbaromoho.com and use the promo code DevOps25, that's DevOps, the number 2 and the number 5, at checkout to claim your discount. Now trust me, you don't want to miss out on this chance to taste the best Cuban hot sauce out there. So go ahead and order your bottle of Barbaro Moho today, and remember to use your promo code DevOps25, that's DevOps, the number 2 and the number 5, to get a 25% discount off of your first order. We'd like to thank Barbaro Moho for sponsoring today's episode. Okay, so we worked through the basics. Learn Linux basics, learn Windows basics, right? Just whatever those are. Maybe you've been in this area for 3 to 5 years, and you've just been either an application developer, or maybe you've been a DBA, and you're wanting to move up the ladder because you think that's a good thing to do. That could be a whole other episode of why you might not want to do that. But let's assume you do. And you've got the basics. You know what grep is. You know what pipe is. You even know what PowerShell is. I'm sorry, I had to throw it in there. But then what's the next thing? I have one word. Let's see if it triggers a landslide for you. Lego.
Okay. Explain.
Nope, it didn't work. Explain. We were sort of talking about it earlier. I think back to when my daughter was a little kid. She loved Legos. And she would take the yellow one and take the red one and take the green one and start building things. But if I took away all of her Legos, she couldn't build anything because she had nothing to build with. So what I'm trying to say is if you don't have toys to play with, if you don't have your little Lego blocks to piece things together, and you're unwilling to experiment, then being an architect probably isn't the best choice for you.
That's absolutely true. I feel that many people are making a mistake trying to figure out what will be the best solution for our production for this use case. And I feel that that's terribly wrong. Actually, it's not wrong. You eventually need to get to what is the best solution for our production. But I feel that good engineers are playing with tools first, without any agenda, without any specific goal. Hey, you don't say, I mean, you do, but you shouldn't say, okay, so I need this. I need to figure out how I'm going to deploy my resources, let's say in Kubernetes cluster. I need Argo CD or Flux. I'm going to read about the two, and I'm going to choose Argo CD or Flux, doesn't matter. And that's going to be our solution. I feel that better results are happening when you say, today I have no special objective or anything like that. But I heard people talking about Argo CD and Flux. Let me see what it is. Let me play around, right? I have no goal with it. No goal whatsoever. I just want to know what it is. And if you do that, then when the time comes and going back in time to what I said before, and you say, okay, how should we deploy our stuff to Kubernetes? You say, oh, wait a minute. I played with those things. I know what they are. Now everything falls into pieces. I know all of a sudden where to look, what to look for. I'm not an expert in either of those two because I just played with them. But I know what I like more. At least that's my approach. I don't know whether that works with others, but my brain works like I want to play with things like those Legos. And then when the time comes to say, okay, we have this problem, then you pull back from your memory and oh, wait, let me think. Oh, yeah, I was doing that. I was experimenting. This might be a good direction. And this, I feel, is even more important for architects, right? The bigger repertoire you have of the tools and the methodologies and processes and what's not, the easier it will be for you to filter and choose the direction. Right?
I just thought of this analogy. I don't know if it'll hold together. As you're growing up, you probably collect books. They may be digital now, but go with me. Try to think physically for a moment. And you may collect books and put them on the shelf. You may never read those books, guilty as charged, but they're on the shelf. And I know where they are on the shelf. It's not like I just bought the book and stuck it over in a corner somewhere. It's on the shelf. And I can refer to it when I need it.
Exactly. I would slightly modify it and say that when I was young, long before internet and all those things, I was a book nerd. I was reading like crazy. And some things, some books one extreme would be I read it from cover to cover, right? Some others would be I just skimmed through it. Well, let's say Encyclopedia Britannica. Nobody ever read it. Or find me a person I would like to meet him or her. But yeah, you have it on a shell and you have, you have a general understanding what they are. And then when the time comes to get the information, oh, yeah, I know where to look. And a person who haven't even skimmed through any of those books, who was just given those books and never looked at them, will not be able to do that.
That would be like walking into a library, like just the normal public library. And you just walk and stand in front of a shelf of books.
Exactly.
It would be no good, no use for you.
Exactly. So that's what maybe analogy to me saying playing with toys would be, okay, skim through the book, right? Kind of like maybe 15 minutes even, right? But okay, so I understand. So this Encyclopedia Britannica, that's what today we would call Wikipedia, right? Okay, I know what it is. I read a couple of entries over there. I see the style. I see what it is, what's not, and stuff like that. Okay, I'm not going to read it, but I know that it's over there. Look at it. There it is, right?
Right. It may take a few moments to get there, but that's okay. You knew where to go look for the thing. So basics, learn the basics as the beginner. Intermediate.
Learn to read.
Learn to read.
Keep the knowledge of the books. Learn to read.
And more importantly, continue to read.
Exactly.
Because as soon as you stop reading, and this goes back to Whitney's episode, as soon as you stop reading, you stop learning. Reading needs to be broadened there a little bit, but hopefully you're listening and get the gist of it. So beginners, intermediates. Now let's say you've been in a architect role in a smaller organization. Going back to your beginning, right? Maybe you don't need to be an architect, but okay, there's really two people that sort of make the decisions for the company. You're comfortable working with cloud, even numerous clouds. You're comfortable with on-prem. Maybe you're coming from healthcare or, again, financial services. So you've been around some of the things, but on a smaller scale. Now you're ready to take the architect role or an architect role, more importantly, at a super large or enterprise organization. What do you have to prepare for there?
Can you repeat? I got lost the thought for a second.
Okay. So you've been an architect at a smaller organization.
Okay.
Now you're ready to go to a big organization. What do you need to know to be successful as an architect? Even though you've done architect type things, you're comfortable with cloud, comfortable with all the things. Now you're going to an enterprise. What do you need to know now?
The first and most important thing you need to know when switching to an enterprise is to identify key people with whom you're going to go and have lunch or dinner or drinks. And those will be the people that will allow you to bypass the administrative nightmare that will prevent you from doing anything. That's the first thing.
That's the first thing. I will give an example of this. At a place that I did some contracting at, I was not a full-time employee there, but I was doing contract work. In order to get anything done, you had to put in a ticket and pray and wait. Or wait and pray. And then you go back to praying and waiting again. Unless you did the following. You open the ticket. And then you send an email to a distribution list saying that you had opened the ticket. And then you call and leave, and I'm leaving out a couple of steps because it got really long. Then you call and leave a voicemail with their call forwarder, call whatever, saying that you had sent an email that you had opened a ticket. Now, fortunately, they were in the same complex where I was, and I knew the people, so I'd walk over saying that I had called and left a voicemail, that I had sent an email saying that the ticket had been entered. It would be completed in the next 5 minutes. Otherwise, it could be months.
Even better, and this is the ultimate, would be if you, at the very end, when you went to that person, if you start the conversation, hey, are we still on for the poker this Friday? If that's how you started the conversation, or whatever you agree with that person, and then continue. Hey, by the way, I opened the ticket. Can you just do something? That's even better combination.
The key part when you're moving from smaller organization into an enterprise, number one, if you were the big dog at your place before, it's sort of like going from high school to college. You may have been the big dog on campus at your high school, but you're now at university to where you're just one of thousands.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you think you're going to go in and move the needle on any enterprise, I'm not saying it cannot be done, but there's a very small percentage chance that it will ever happen that way. Number two, if you don't know how to use Word and Visio, or in today's world, Google Docs and Draw.io or something like that, you have to learn those tools. Oh, yeah, that's true. You have to learn those tools now. No choice. Because maybe you were just literally drawing on the back of a napkin and you were able to pull things off. Should you have been doing that? No. You should have been doing better documentation than that. But now, when you get to an enterprise, everything is documented 50 ways to Sunday before even one issue is opened.
That's one of the things that's one of the things that should go the other way around. That's one of the things that I feel that where smaller companies, startups are failing, and that's documenting, right? Because everything is from Joe to Michael. Michael goes to, we all know each other and we all do it and stuff like that, and nothing gets documented. That's where we are failing when we are smaller.
It may be being documented. It may be being documented in pull requests, but it's not being aggregated in a way that it's useful.
Exactly.
We have all of these point answers all over the place that tell no story. It'd be like taking a pack of cards and we decided that we're going to play poker. You and I, Victor, are going to play poker, and we're actually be in person across the table from each other. Let's say it's in New York City, just to make it a place that isn't horrible. We're in New York City, we're across the table, and we have a pack of cards. But we decided to ship those cards via FedEx out to California to a friend that's out in California, that then put it up on a Blue Origin rocket or on a SpaceX rocket to where they were jettisoned out. And then we still have to play cards with that pack of cards. That's what it feels like when you're trying to pull together information from something that is scattered all over the place. Yes, as smaller companies, we could do much better at doing that.
Yeah, because the big difference is in scale, and that leads to higher and higher specialization. When you think about it, up to some degree, if there's thousands of you, it doesn't make much sense that thousands of you are equally good and equally bad in that things, right? You want to have 10 of those 1,000 that are amazing at databases, and another 10 that are amazing at, system administration and what's not. That doesn't happen when you're a small company, right? I work in a very small company, and if you would be all specialized, we would need to triple our headcount, right? When you become specialized, you're more organized in a way, right? That's how it should be. I mean, in big companies, that fails miserably very often. But there is that crucial difference, right? That you cannot... What I'm trying really to say is that, yes, in a small company of 20, 30, 40 people, you can easily find that half of them know the whole system. Because we all worked on it. Depending on the time of the day and the day of the week and what's not, I worked on this and then that and stuff like that. Everybody knows everything. But in a big company, you cannot find a person who knows how the system works. You cannot find even a person who knows how a subset of the system works.
And if you do, that person had better have a lot of life insurance and a number of other things on their corpus, because otherwise, if they're gone, your business is in deep trouble. So let's recap this. If you're trying to get down the path of being a DevOps architect, and right now in 2024, and I think these parts will carry on forever. So we're going to revisit this idea at the beginning, probably-ish, of every year as we go forward. If you're a beginner, you've got to know the basics of operating systems. Agreed?
Yes. And after that, you will need to... And this is where I feel I'm entering into conflicts with people. And then you need to specialize. You cannot think of yourself as... Unless we're talking again about tiny companies. You cannot think of yourself as DevOps that kind of, I do everything that is not developing JavaScript applications. Doesn't work.
And then intermediate. What did we say about intermediate? I forgot. That was 10 minutes ago.
I think that after the basics, you pick your weapon, right? Already there. Now it's not going to be only one weapon, but you should pick only one weapon, right? You will end up in 10 years having 5 of them, right? But pick... ESX, right? Virtualization, AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, right? Not 3 of them. Kubernetes. database, something, pick something. I so freak out and get frustrated when I hear those questions like, okay, how can I be DevOps? And what do you mean by DevOps? I manage everything in my company. I think it's a very, very bad strategy. That's why I'm negative when people ask me, how do I become DevOps? You don't become DevOps. You learn AWS. I'm using AWS as example, right? But anything, right?
Well, my start was Sybase. And fortunately, since all the shops I was in were Microsoft based, at the time I could take Microsoft SQL Server and swap it with Sybase.
Because that was my first database. They were bought afterwards by Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Sybase was purchased by SAP, I think. They were a split. So it was the same base code base up until version 6, 6.5, and then they split. Something, trust me, it's been many years since this is 30 years plus now, so I'm remembering old history.
I just realized that I lied to you right now. Sybase was not my first database. The first database job I did, Microsoft Access.
No, that's not a database. You could argue it's a database, but it's not a database.
Access? Not Excel. Access.
No, I know. You said Access. I heard you. I'm just... Okay, technically it's a database, yes. Just like Whatcom SQL was a database. There's another old name for everybody to listen about. But anyway, and then we move on to quote-unquote advanced, where you're up-leveling from small, medium company to an enterprise. You still have to know your tech that you learned all those years before. You've specialized in that tech. But if you haven't figured out people skills by this point, that's what you really need once you move to enterprise. People skills and politics skills, which is why I was never an architect in an enterprise. The politics and me, not so much. Or maybe so.
You know, I feel that being an expert in those areas, more wider areas, right? So you can be expert, say, I'm Java developer, that's what I do 50 years, kind of like, that's cool. I feel that in wider areas, what makes somebody really expert is when he has sufficient knowledge to be able to connect the dots and understand something without really entering into that something, if that makes sense, right? Like developing, right? Writing code. If you developed long enough and if you experienced enough languages, saying, oh, if you give me tomorrow, I don't know, something I never worked in, Python, let's say. I mean, I worked with Python. Let's say that I didn't. I would call myself a good developer if it wouldn't take me more than a day to be already bashing it like crazy. Like when experience allows you to actually fast track anything within certain area, of course.
Okay. So if you're wanting to go down this path, reach out to us in the Slack workspace and tell us what you think. Are we completely off base on this? The link to the Slack workspace is down in the description. And let us know, because we're actually curious. Because if you think you can go straight to an architecture team in an enterprise with zero knowledge of how to use Word and Visio, you're fooling yourself. We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.